Unless ghosts have found a way to break the second law of thermodynamics, most ghost stories have some sort of logical explanation. Be it fakes, sleep paralysis, or just a good old-fashioned case of a hotel manager trying to drum up tourism. One such case was solved by a professor and an ophthalmologist over 100 years ago, writing up the story in a medical case report. W.H. Wilbur described the haunting of a whole family who began to see and hear strange people moving about in the night after they moved into an old, run-down house. In 1912, the house of Mrs. H and her husband, Mr. G, as they were named in the case report, burned down. For the winter, they were forced to look for an interim home. Finding none of good quality, they ended up taking a house that had not been occupied for the last 10 years, aside from the occasional renter. Mrs. H described it as being on the sunny side of the street, though oddly no warmth or sun seemed to penetrate through the windows into that large, rambling house. It wasn't long after they moved in that they began to notice strange occurrences. They had not been in the house for more than a couple of days when they felt very depressed. The house was strangely quiet. The servants walked about on thickly carpeted floors so quietly that you could not even hear them at work. The house was as cold as it was quiet. With the very old furnace breaking down 2 days into their stay, they had decided to stay in the house without the children at first, for that very reason. One morning, Mrs. H heard footsteps in the room above her head. She hurried up the stairs. To her surprise, the room was empty. She passed into the next room, and then into all the rooms on that floor, and then to the floor above, to find that she was the only person in that part of the house. When the furnace was repaired, the children arrived, and the whole family began to feel ill, and hear and see strange things that weren't there. Despite bed rest and iron supplements, Mrs. H couldn't shake a headache she had for 2 weeks after moving in. Mr. G, meanwhile, was having other problems. It had always been Mr. G's habit at night, before going to bed, to sit in the dining room and eat some fruit. In this house, when seated right at the table with his back to the hall, he invariably felt as if something or someone was behind him, watching him. He therefore turned his chair to be able to watch what was going on in the hall. A poltergeist will tend to ruin your enjoyment of fruit. The children became pale, listless, and lost all interest in playing in their playroom at the top of the house. Eventually, Mrs. H took them away for a few weeks, leaving Mr. G entirely alone with the ghost that likes to watch him eat bananas. He spent those weeks being woken by doors knocking and bells ringing, though when he investigated there was never anyone in sight. One night upon her return, Mrs. H was woken by footsteps, doors slamming, and pots clashing as if something was going on downstairs. Soon she realized that there was no staircase behind the wall, only the thickly carpeted front stairs on which no footsteps could be heard. All that paled in comparison to what came next, when all residents of the house began to see apparitions. On one occasion, in the middle of the morning, Mrs. H passed from the drawing room into the dining room. She was surprised to see at the further end of the dining room, coming towards her, a strange woman, dark-haired and dressed in black. As she walked steadily into the dining room to meet her, she disappeared. On returning from a night at the opera, the couple did not have a normal evening. That night they had vague and strange dreams, which appeared to last for hours. When the morning came, they felt too tired and ill to get up. Mr. G said that in the middle of the night he woke up feeling as if something had grabbed him by the throat and was trying to strangle him. They were convinced the house was haunted. It didn't help to calm things down when the family investigated and found that the previous occupants had the same experiences. Then all the plants in the house died. These clues led to what was going on. A rational explanation was guessed at by Mr. H's brother. He believed that everyone in the house had been poisoned, and called in the professor to assist in finding a rational explanation. Pretty soon, after interviewing the occupants and conducting a search of the whole house, he found the culprit: carbon monoxide poisoning. He found the furnace was in very bad condition. The fumes, instead of going up the chimney, were pouring gases of carbon monoxide into the rooms. He advised us not to let the children sleep in the house one more night. If they did, he said, we might find in the morning that some of them would not wake again. Years later, the theory would be confirmed by ophthalmologists looking at one of the younger children's eyes, whose vision had become distorted. Exposure to a poisonous gas was found to be bearing a relation to the ocular disturbance, he stated. The other hauntings could be attributed to the same cause. So not supernatural forces, just an old boiler in need of a service.